welcome to Prime Debate. Judiciary is supreme and there is no denying this fact. Every decision of the judiciary is taken as a law in itself and it sets a precedent for other judgments to follow. But there have been some instances where we have had some unusual judgments coming our way which force us to debate the rationale behind them. Tonight on Prime Debate, we try to figure out whether the courts should take recourse to extreme interpretation of law in the wider interest of justice. In an unusual judgment, the Supreme Court let off 3 gang rape convicts after they claimed to have reached a compromise formula with the victim. What comes as a surprise is that the apex court has compounded an offence which is non-compoundable under the Indian Penal Code.
The Supreme Court has accepted a compromise reached between 3 convicts and their rape victim. The Apex Court has reduced their sentence from 10-year rigorous imprisonment to 3.5 years imprisonment, which the accused have already served. A bench of Justices Markanday Katju and Gyan Sudha Mishra passed this order, disposing of an appeal filed by Baldev Singh and 2 others against a Punjab and Haryana High Court judgment upholding the trial court's order of 10-year rigorous imprisonment and a fine of ₹1,000 each. The prosecution case was that the woman was gang raped by the 3 on 3rd March 1997. The bench said,
"Admittedly, the appellants have already undergone about 3.5 years imprisonment. The incident is 14 years old. The appellants and the prosecutrix are married, not to each other. The prosecutrix has also 2 children. An application and an affidavit have been filed before us stating that the parties want to finish the dispute, have entered into a compromise on September 1st, 2007 and that the accused may be acquitted, and now there is no misunderstanding between them. IPC section 376 is a non-compoundable offence. However, the fact that the incident is an old one is a circumstance for invoking the proviso to section 376(2)(g and awarding a sentence less than 10 years, which is ordinarily the minimum sentence under that provision, as we think that there are adequate and special reasons for doing so."
Though Justice Gyan Sudha Mishra was not initially inclined to compound the matter as it was not a compoundable offence, the Apex Court later relented and agreed to let them off provided the convicts paid ₹50,000 each to the victim. The Apex Court ordered that the amount shall be paid to the victim within 3 months, failing which the same shall be recovered under the Land Revenue Act from the trio and paid to the victim.
To discuss this issue, we have in our studios Sherry Sabharwal, a professor in the Department of Sociology at Punjab University, Chandigarh; Anupam Gupta, an advocate and former senior standing counsel for Chandigarh administration; Justice N.K. Sood, a retired High Court judge and former Lok Ayukt, Haryana; and Sangeeta Bhalla, who is Director, University Institute of Legal Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Welcome to the studio. Justice Sood, I'll start with you. How do you look at the judgment of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court has done 3 things. Bench of Justice Katju and Justice Mishra have accepted a compromise between the 3 convicts and the gang rape victim, reduced the sentence from 10 years, and also ordered asked the 3 convicts to pay ₹50,000 each to the victim.
Well, it is an unusual judgment because such things do not happen normally. But the judgment is within the framework of law because as you said in your introduction that they have compounded. They have not compounded, they have reduced the sentence, which they are fully entitled to do because the law itself provides, there is a proviso in section 376 which says that the punishment can be reduced under special circumstances for the reasons given in the judgment.
That's a kind of an extreme interpretation of the law, no?
Oh, it is. But when there is some law, and the Supreme Court has taken recourse to that provision, we cannot say that they have gone beyond the law.
Justice Sood, how do you think they have undergone only 3.5 years, so out of 10 years,
here
I think the court let them off too easily?
The reasons given by the Supreme Court are only ones which we have read in the newspapers. We do not know whether that compromise deed was under pressure or something, because I have a personal feeling that generally the rape victims are very, very ordinary people, whereas the accused are generally powerful people.
Yes.
Either landlords or politicians, And it is very easy for them to pressurize the victim to enter into such kind of a compromise.
Ms. Sabharwal, how do you react to the compromise between the rapist and the victim? Do you think this compromise is actually a compromise with one's honor?
That is the most horrifying part of it. I mean, the kind of signals that they are sending through this judgment is that, I'm not talking about the legal aspect of it because I just study society. It's as if honor or shame, for that matter, or trauma is quantifiable. And you can quantify it and then compensate it. That is the actual question that comes to my mind. And the saddest part is, it is made to seem as if they are doing this lady a favor. That now she can go on with her life, apni zindagi ji sakti hai. What zindagi are they talking about here? When in case she's been pressurized to in some way, agree to whatever is being given to her, and how do you quantify the trauma she went through?
Ms. Bhalla, do you agree with what Ms. Sabharwal is saying? She's saying it's a horrifying development. Don't you think that 14 years had passed, so it was time to move on?
Of late, Supreme Court has started taking a middle approach, that okay, we will take this compromise between the parties as a mitigating factor, and we will consider it, and we will say we cannot give you the clear acquittal as is possible in case of compoundable offences, but we will take it as mitigating circumstance and we will reduce the sentence. But the problem here is that this is not a normal offence. This is an offence against the dignity of a woman, and it is as grave as murder. In murder, it is the life which is lost, whereas in case of rape, it is the dignity which a woman loses. And then merely because 14 years have passed, which is usual for any case when it reaches up to Supreme Court, and then it could not be a mitigating factor that 14 years have passed, therefore let us come forward and tell them you can compromise and we can accept it.
So you don't think what the Supreme Court has done is the correct thing?
To my mind, no.
At least the reason of 14 years given is not very appealing, because it is the fault of the judiciary itself. It has taken 14 years to come for the case to come up.
Absolutely. Mr. Gupta, before I ask you to join the discussion, let me once again read out what the clause which the Supreme Court has taken recourse to, section 376(2)(g) of the Indian Penal Code. It says, the court may, for adequate and special reasons to be mentioned in the judgment, impose a sentence of imprisonment for a term of less than 10 years.
It is proviso.
Yes. Is it judicious use of this section by the Supreme Court, Mr. Gupta?
I would not question the Supreme Court's jurisdiction in principle, but I find the exercise of the jurisdiction in this case absolutely perverse. And I am shocked that a bench so talented as Justice Karju's and Justice Gyan Sudha Mishra's should have descended to achieve this, even with the best of intentions, in a case of rape. I am not even focusing on the quantification of the compensation, because say instead of 50,000 each, if it had been 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs, the higher the monetary ladder you go up, the greater is the injustice in philosophical terms and in social terms.
Also, it doesn't mitigate the trauma of
the victim. It doesn't mitigate, and the rich with all their resources. Wealth is not a mitigating circumstance. The poverty of the complainant may be an aggravating circumstance. But the resourcefulness, the monetary resourcefulness of the accused cannot be a mitigating circumstance, cannot facilitate the offence. With great respect to Justice Sood, I would treat it as a case of compounding, not direct compounding which results in acquittal, but compounding of a kind, a composition, using the term composition in the largest sense of the term. The injustice of the entire act, the haste with which the court has allowed itself to plunge into it without realizing the consequences of this action.
But Mr. Gupta, do you think since the case is 14 years old and these people had already undergone 3.5 years, that could have weighed with the court?
If this serves as a precedent, 3/4 of Indian offences or convictions would have to be set aside or sentences would have to be reduced. And may I point out, in 2006, a whole chapter 21A was added to the Code of Criminal Procedure on plea bargaining for the first time.
That's right.
A very salutary innovation. We have it in America, we have it in European countries, only our system was too stiff. But there is a proviso. Apart from the sentence, beyond 7 years, but offences against women and cannot be invite pre-bargaining under any circumstances.
Justice Sood, would you like to react? 3 members of the panel here are feeling that this is unfair what has happened.
No, judgment is, I said, within the framework of law, but whether it should have been done or not are two separate issues. Placed in my position, whatever they have said, normally I would take recourse to that if I had been the judge on the bench. But we do not know.
So if you were the judge on the bench, you would not have done this?
I would not have done it. Certainly not.
Now, Justice Sood, the court has also announced that the 3 convicts will give 50,000 each to the victim. How do you look at that? I remember in some Islamic countries there is, there is a system of some kind of a blood money in case of a murder. Do you think this almost looks like that?
I would think so, because it's adding insult to injury, because the dignity of a person has been violated, and here you are trying to compensate her by offering some money to her. Mr. Anupam Gupta has rightly pointed out that higher you place the financial compensation, the more insult you are adding to the...
Ms. Sabharwal, do you think if the compensation was higher, it would mitigate the offence to some extent, or...?
No, what's happening here is that, as he mentioned, whether it's 50,000 or 5 lakhs or 50 lakhs, the point is that you are saying it's going to be a rich man's game ultimately. Crime karo aur nikal lo, jitne paise utna ucha crime kar sakte hain ab aap. Because that is, again, the trend is very dangerous. You know, it happens once, certain times, as I said, the merits of the case I don't know. But when I just look at it, I just see this, and they're saying this woman has agreed to sign, and hence there is compensation. She must have signed something. How did she come to sign it? Were there political pressures? Were there monetary pressures? Sometimes you're just poor. You need the money, 50,000 is good enough, into 3, whatever the case may be. Sometimes it is just social pressures. Let's move on, as they say. But ultimately it's pressure, it's not voluntary.
Ms. Bella, before you go into the break, would you like to comment on the compensation amount?
As far as compensation is concerned, it's a recognized aspect of the criminal justice system, and our policy has been to encourage compensation to the victims. But compensation along with the full term of imprisonment, that would have been something different. But here compensation, that 250,000 from each of the accused, that is going in lieu of the punishment. That is not acceptable.
So it almost looks that you pay this money and then
you can get yourself.
Like you saying blood money.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's time for a short break now. We'll continue the discussion when we return. We are discussing whether rape can be compromised. Justice Sood, what is surprising here is that one of the 2 judges was actually a lady judge. Or it's not fair to talk about the gender issue when it comes to judges?
Well, you're right, but I said in the very beginning, we do not know what were the considerations, under what circumstances this agreement had been entered into between the parties, what were the circumstances, whether the victim had appeared before the Supreme Court or not. So
we don't know the full facts.
Unless we know the full facts, we do not know whether the discretion granted under this proviso to section 376(2) has been exercised judicially or not. Maybe.
But Justice Sood, since you've been on the bench, tell us, is it usual for the judges to take to the extreme interpretation of the law? And
no, it is not usual. But this, under unusual circumstances, yes, it should be there should be a recourse to it. The very fact that the legislature has provided for this eventuality, courts cannot ignore it.
Absolutely. Now, Justice Sood, there have been instances of some rapists marrying the victim. How do you look at that?